lot of liquor.
A lot of folks just say, oh, just throw it down the hatch and don't chew it. And I'm like, what a travesty. Every bite that you take from this oyster, it releases something else, some other flavor profile. It starts off like this, and the next bite is something else. It's melony, and another part is kind of like a seaweed, kind of like, what the heck is going on every bite?
Mariculture in Alaska is very interesting. First oyster farm was in the late 1980s down on Prince of Wales out of Kaufman Cove called Canoe Lagoon. It's still operational today, but the oysters that come from Southeast Alaska, the waters here are so clean. They're just amazing, amazing product. Very challenging environment to operate in, salt water, storms, weather, bears. So it's not an easy lifestyle. Alaska has historically been a state of extraction, oil, mining, timber, commercial fishing, which is sustainable. Oyster and mariculture production is very sustainable. Again, super pure environment. The majority of the farms in the state are fairly small. There's a band of 6 or 8 that probably produce about 25,000 dozen or so, and then a couple of larger farms that do 75,000. Historically, oysters peaked at about 1 million individual oysters per year, and now there's been, in the last 5, 6, 8 years, more interest in developing some larger farms.
So this is Ketchimak Shellfish Mariculture Association. This building was completed in 2008, but KSMA, the nonprofit, was started in 1994 as the Alaskan shellfish industry was legalized in '89. None of the oyster farmers knew how to do anything. Where do we get our seed? How do we plant them? So KSMA was formed to help teach those oyster farmers what in the hell they're going to do. Come on in. Right here with the algae, we grow 3 different species of algae, 2 diatoms and a flagellate, and we start this in mid-December. They come as cultures the size of your pinky, 15 mils, and we feed them, and we get basically plant food and get the cells to divide and split and split and split until the cultures get strong. Like this is a super nice culture right here, beautiful. And then once they've reached this stage, we put them into these carboys, 5-gallon carboys, and all the racks will be full. You know, there'll be 30 of them. And once we're there, it's time to buy our larvae. We get the larvae from out of state because it's not cost effective to grow it here.
We funded one project where they were already developing different strains of oysters for Pacific Northwest. And all we're doing is like saying, look, this private company that's already developing oyster strains and testing them. Take those same 20 different strains you develop and test down south and test them here in Alaska. And just tell us, like, does strain number 18 grow the fastest in Alaska? It's not the same one that grows the fastest down in Washington. We know that from their preliminary results. Like, there's a difference.
This is our algae room. This is the algae production room, and we've got 250-liter bags and 500-liter bags of different microalgae growing, different species. You can tell by the color difference that they're different species of algae, and they're all just different sizes. And we try to have a variety of food for the oysters so that they can eat a healthy meal. Like some of these big diatoms are more like steak and potatoes, and some of these are like a little vegan salad, you know, depending on which size. But we have them all mixing together in the end, and it all pumps out to them. So there's a variety of food that they can choose from.
The thing about algae is you have to harvest it. You can't save it. You got something's become limiting, whether it's going to be metabolites from the nutrients get absorbed, the light can't penetrate, they use up all the nutrients, metabolites contaminate it, whatever the source might be. So you have to continually harvest it and move it on. So in here we have 3 days in the flask, 3 days in carboys, and 3 days in a call wall system. And then it goes out to the floor, and then we lose kind of control over it, but it's going to be all harvested within 3 or 4 days.
After they've come out of the larval tank, we'll set them in here, and we use epinephrine to help set them. It convinces them to grow shells and set on the bottom of the screen. And we put a little bit of ground oyster shell in there as well, so they have a little grain of sand that each microscopic guy can attach to and start growing their own shell. Well, this is our bottle system, and it's very similar to what we're doing over there. It's just water, oxygen, and algae coming into this big tank, gravity fed down through this 3-inch PVC, and then up through the bottles. So it's pushing them up, making them dance around, and depending on the size of them, if the small ones you can see they're dancing real well, the bigger ones are just kind of moving a little bit. But that way they're all getting a lot of food and oxygen at an even rate. What we'll do is we'll let them grow until they fill about halfway up, and then we'll sift them out through probably a 2300 screen and put the big guys in the next bottle and the little guys back in that bottle, just to give them all a more even amount of food to grow, so nobody's hogging anybody else out.
Well, years ago, there was a crisis on the whole West Coast, though, too, for oyster seed. At the time, I decided either if I'm going to continue in this line of business, I had to have control over my seed source. So, as much as possible, that's where I'm at. What's the whole point of a Flupsy, you know? Why not just have some spat sock and have it out here in some thin gear, right? Some real fine mesh. Because all that stuff gets fouled up, number one, there's no flow of food to them. Starting with that primary reason, what we want is we're starting with, now we're being able to get 3mm seed. This is 2380, 2.38 millimeter screen, okay? And we have even smaller, we've got smaller seed. And this stuff gets fouled up very quickly, right? Clogged up. So what we're doing is, when you have these little screen sizes, you have to pump water through them. The water has the food. So that turns into a pumping equation. How do you pump the most efficiently? And the right type of real estate where you can actually do a nursery system. And what we do is we actually, this is a series of channels in here, and we bail it out. And the water then drops a little bit. And now it allows new incoming water with the food to come up through these bins that have seed and exit. So see how big it is already? This is part of our climate adaptation. All fishing paid for this. And now this is doing better and improving in production.
I have been really blessed with having Eric as my seed provider. That way I'm not doing any of the Flupsy work, I'm not doing any of the nursery work. I'm just putting oysters straight into my trays with liners and putting them out onto the farm to grow them out.
We came out here, we had a vision and a passion, and you know, if we had failed, it would have been a complete failure. We had all of our eggs in one basket. You know, we came out here and my wife got pregnant 6 months after. We had 2 kids. It was like survival of the fittest, you know? We actually are building a farmer training center, a for-profit farmer training center. We bought that whole peninsula over there, or we bought out coral. I mean, you can't just go buy out coral, you know what I'm saying? Just trying to teach a 20-year-old dude how to sort oysters. You know, I mean, they can dump and dump and dump all day and they're psyched, you know?
I met Jimmy, we started dating, and he kind of showed me around the oyster farm. I was like, oh, this is oyster farming. And yeah, I moved here, and everything I've learned about oyster farming, I've learned like hands-on.
Like you get lunch all day too, you know? Oh, so good.
Especially in these rural areas, that's one of the big problems in Alaska is in employment in rural Alaska. Wage and income jobs are hard to come by in a lot of the smaller areas, so it ends up a drain of young people. They leave the communities, you know, they go out to school or whatever, and then they just don't come back. So in addition, like a lot of the United States, the population of particularly southeast and Alaska is aging. So that combined with a lot of the young kids leaving, our populations are declining. So things like oyster farms and mariculture can help provide good, solid jobs, you know, basically year-round jobs for people, and then they can stay, and you know, it's an awesome lifestyle, like commercial fishing and being on the water. It's a lifestyle job. You're not sitting in an office and punching a time clock. You know, you're on your own and you get to make decisions. So that's another positive.
Welcome to Doyle Bay. This is the oyster and seaweed farm. So we have, on this side, we've got the oyster grow shellfish apparatus. These are the oyster grow, these came out of New Brunswick, and they're all surface culture. So if you see them and they're flipped over with the floats up, they have oysters in them. And we've got about 2.2 million oysters in the farm right now. And each of these cages will hold 3,000 oysters. And you can see the ones that are flipped up, those are the ones that either don't have seed in them right now, or we will flip them up to control biofouling.
We had different size seed in the original outplanting. We had 7/8 seed, 5/8 seed, and 1/2 inch seed. So by knowing which seed went in first and what size it was, with the general timeline being about 1.5 to a year for our oysters to come to market, I can estimate where our oysters of size are at. However, now that we've gotten a tracking software called Ocean Farmer, no longer have to just memorize things. It'll tell us what lines are ready and when.
Oh, that's better. Yep. This is the frill. That's sign of actually a really healthy oyster, because it means they're growing quickly.
The prismatic
and there
layer.
lots of food availability in the water. And the nice deep cup is an indication of a good oyster. I mean, you got good meat content in there. So those are things that we want. I think I'm going to go with that one.
And that's one of the main benefits of using a floating culture on a hard substrate. So it's most specifically the hard substrate and the active husbandry that causes the shell depth. When you get mud bottom or sandy oysters, they're really flat most of the time.
That right there, my friends, is a winner. Skull.
So the thing with the tumbler sorter is it chips the new growth off. That's important. So that's the tumbling part. It sorts them by size, is important, but it also washes them. There's a spray bar that cleans them.
Singulator turns, I mean, you can dump as many oysters in here as fast as you can possibly dump oysters in. Turns them all into single file. Onto the belt, all single file, up to 8 oysters a second. We're sorting. That stabilizes them before they go into the camera. It takes a picture of every single oyster. Counts them, sorts them, and then comes down and puts them into the different sizes. You program whatever sizes you want. Does all the counting. You got market size, going back to the farm, larges, smalls.
And then we've got a little puff of air on the other side that just puts it out.
Yeah, the puff of air really makes it so you can go fast. If you're trying to move an arm, trying to flick them off the conveyor, you couldn't operate that fast. You know, 8 oysters a second. You know, you just can't. You have to adjust all the air, you know, bursts to whatever burst you want.
It makes no sense at all to recreate the wheel. But we also are in a unique position because we're starting later, that we can look around the world and say, I like what you're doing with this, I like what you're doing with this, I like what you're doing with this. Bring that in, adapt it for Alaska's industry, implement it in that way. Then we know we picked from the best of the best, and we try to adapt it to make it the most effective that we can make it in Alaska, given Alaska's conditions.
When you look at like a Wellfleet oyster from like Chesapeake Bay, or if you look at like a Maine oyster, well, Alaska's kind of lumped into one big zone, and there's like a lot of different growing waters in Alaska, from like Kodiak all the way to Ketchikan Bay, Prince William Sound, and then Juneau, and then here, like that's like 4 or 5 different flavors of oyster, you know. So I'd like to see the Alaskan oysters put in that same category of a select, like, quality oyster, you know.
And the oyster bars, a lot of the trend has been smaller. This oyster here is basically what I would like to be known for. This size would be what we consider a petite oyster, and it's very much suited for the half-shell market, right? As you can see, it's very well-rounded of an oyster. That basically tells me that there's a lot of meat to shell ratio is very good. As well, I love the easily identifiable hinge right here, so it makes oyster shucking very easy. And this deep cup also allows for, I don't know if it allows for more liquor, but it seems like there's much more of the essence of the oysters.
I think one of our philosophies is just market what you can grow. The local markets here, everyone comes to Alaska and want big oysters on the Homer Spit, and like, it was so hard. And then we were selling these oysters in Maine that were small and into all the cities, and we were just like, we're just gonna copy that business model out here and not cater to the chefs. You know, if you cater to the chefs, then that, like, it would be a 5-year product. 3-year product is really what you need. You really gotta do it within 3 years.
I decided I really wanted to base more of my sales out of Cordova. So I sell to local restaurants and lodges through the summer season, and then I just sell direct to the public. I just do a pop-up. When I do a harvest, I'll say, hey, pre-order, I'm harvesting next week. I really like that. I really like interacting with the community that way, and you know, it's just been a fun new way to get to know Cordova.
This is our local oyster stout made by a local brewer, and it is made from oysters off of this farm.
Okay. How do you make an oyster stout?
I have no idea. I'm not a brewer.
Yeah. How many oysters are you selling a year right now?
Since we put in the oyster bar, it's probably 500% more than we ever thought it would be.
We did a study about how many oysters could Anchorage handle. And of course, this was 15, 20 years ago. They said maybe 1,000 dozen a week. The market for oysters is insatiable. So it's really, really good, at least for the oyster mariculture industry, that they're getting top dollar. It's a great product. You know, the dream has come true with oyster farming in Alaska. Now it's just a matter of the production meeting demand. You know, someday that probably two will meet, but right now, the restaurants that I'm aware of, you know, they call me, think I have adult oysters. You know, where can I get some oysters? Where can I get some oysters? And I think the oyster farmers will probably share that story that they can't meet the demand. I think if you had some real big success stories and people saw those success stories, then you have a dramatic change. Just need to see someone driving around in a whatever, an SUV or whatever they are these days, a Denali SUV that, you know, hey, I'm an oyster farmer, or I'm a kelp farmer, or, you know, showing that they're making a good living doing mariculture. And I think you'll have a lot of sort of copycats.